The puppet tools are especially powerful in getting certain animation results, but they're also not the right solution for every situation. So let's experiment and learn and kind of dig into the puppet tools a little bit, and I'll describe and show you what I'm talking about. So I've got a new project open up in After Effects. I'm going to bring in two files from our source files. So if you downloaded the zip source files for this project, you should be able to find tree left and tree right. Go ahead and bring those into After Effects. You'll see them here. They're just two palm trees. I'm going to create a new composition. I'll call this puppet demo. And all of the other default settings are fine. From the last exercise I did, I modified my dimensions of my composition. So I want to make sure that I reset that to HD TV 1080, and then I could reset the frame rate to 30 if I want to have just kind of some even numbers there. Duration of 10 seconds is fine. We might need to extend this later to 15, but that's good for now. Background color as black will be fine for now. I'm going to drop a solid in over this in a moment just so we have something other than that one. Now go ahead and bring in tree. Let's bring in tree left. You'll notice that it's super huge. We can scale that down just hitting a quick scale keyframe or scale property. I'll go to, let's go a little bit bigger. Let's go to 50%. Yeah, 50 is pretty good. It fills up our composition. In fact, if I wanted to kind of be a little particular, maybe 35% feels best. That way we've got some room for this thing to blow back and forth. So there's our tree. And to apply puppet tools to this, let me first explain like when to use puppet tools. Now, if we wanted to animate this tree, say blowing in the wind, to use traditional position or rotation and pivot points, kind of like we did our robot arm, won't exactly give the deformation that we want. It would look a little robotic. It would look a little bit rigid. These palm branches wouldn't bend and wouldn't really react to the wind in a believable way. So that's a good time to use puppet tools. I'm going to show you a quick demo in this video, and then we'll talk about how we kind of prep this object for more control with these puppet tools in a further video. So go ahead and find the puppet pin tool in your toolbar. It looks like a thumbtack. It's on the far right hand side of my toolbar. I'm going to click on the puppet pin tool and some new settings show up. We can have a little mesh setting, we have an expansion setting, we have triangles. Now I'm working in After Effects 2015 just based on my operating system requirements. If you're in After Effects 2020, things might look a little bit different for you. So I'll post some links in the lesson as well that can kind of give you a translation of some of these descriptions. Because I believe expansions is phrased a little differently in the newest versions of After Effects. So with the puppet pin tool selected, go ahead and click in the middle of these palm branches and then click down below in the trunk, like the very bottom of the trunk. And we've just placed two puppet pins. And these puppet pins act almost like, if you think of like a kind of like a paper doll, like where you put the pins for rotation and that sort of thing. But the difference between these puppet tools and say like a paper doll is that on a paper doll they only rotate, and with this tool it actually deforms the mesh. So if I click and drag any of these points, you'll notice that one stays put, that's the one at the bottom, and the one that I'm dragging moves around. And After Effects tries to interpolate those kind of pixels and those graphics in between those 2 points almost in real time, a few frames behind, right? A little bit of lag. The other pin that I'm not selecting stays put. So if I wanted to rotate based on the trunk, I could grab that one. If I wanted to rotate based on these palm branches up above, I can just grab that one. So we saw when we placed those pins that the yellow dots represented the puppet pins, but we also saw our graphic change into a mesh of triangles. So I can see up here that I have 464 triangles in my mesh. This is how After Effects manages this warping. So it's using these triangles to kind of map the pixels to each one, and then based off where the pins are, it's moving those triangles and thus the pixels. So that's how it accomplishes this effect. There are a few settings that will impact how good this effect looks. Your expansions and your triangles. Now the higher the triangle count, if I move this up, you'll notice that I have a deeper, more dense mesh of triangles down here, which means it can get a slightly better warp on all of those pixels. If we have very few triangles, like let's say if I have 187, you see that there's a few bits of kind of artifacting here. And if, as I move this guy out, if it only has 3 triangles down here to make the trunk, it kind of looks a little bit faceted. It looks a little bit, not as precise. So the more triangles, the better graphically, but the more triangles, the worse it is performance-wise. So you're always going to want to look for a balance between high triangle count and performance. So I'm going to put this back up to say a number around 400. That feels pretty good for this one. Now, the other thing that happens when I place those puppet pins is we see them added down here in our timeline. Under Effects, we have the puppet tool now, and then we have a mesh. So this is our triangle, collection of triangles. That's referred to as a mesh. And then we have our triangle count, our expansion, which our expansion, as it's higher, it means it grabs more around the graphic. And as it's less, it grabs into the graphic less. So why would you want to use this? Well, sometimes you want to grab a little bit beyond the graphic just to make sure you're not losing any stray pixels. So that's what that expansion will do. So it's fine to have that expansion a little bit past your graphic. I wouldn't do it maybe that much, but you can do it just maybe 10 or 15 pixels just to make sure no stray pixels are getting lost. It also will, if you noticed when I had fewer triangles, it didn't grab some of the pixels here, so a bigger expansion might grab those pixels. So you can have fewer triangles with a larger expansion. We also have, under the Deform tab, our puppet pins. So this is where you can animate these. So each pin I placed on this graphic will show up under the puppet effect, under the mesh, and under that Deform tab as puppet pin 1, 2, 10, 1000. Once again, much like triangles, you want enough pins to do your animation clearly and properly, but the more you add, the more complicated it is going to become to animate your object. So kind of address this sparingly. You don't want a pin for every single part of your branch, or else you're going to be animating quite a lot, and After Effects is going to eventually start lagging and bogging down a little bit. Now with more pins, you can get more precise, so I can animate these branches really carefully if I have a lot of pins. But that means for each movement, let's say if I had 5 pins on each branch, that means each movement that I make, I would have to move each of these pins. 1, 2, 3. You can see my motion paths starting to show up. 4, 5. Then I got to animate these. So at first, when you're placing all these pins, you might think, oh, I need 50 pins to get the precision I need. But as you start animating them, you realize that 50 pins can be, 10 times the work than just putting a few key pins, say 5 or fewer, on this object. So if you want to remove pins, it's as easy as selecting them. I'm going to grab all but the first 2 and hit delete. And when I hit that delete key, it might take a moment. It may even struggle to delete them. Let me make sure I got those. Come on, After Effects. There we go. So you can select and delete those pins pretty easily as well. So that's the core basics of the puppet tools. It's used to create these simple deformations that you can't accomplish through normal position movements. Now there are a few other tools in the puppet kind of collection. There is an overlap tool, which is going to allow you to specify which objects should overlap another. So for example, if you want these palm branches to pass in front of the trunk and not behind, this overlap tool can help specify how those objects should behave when they collide. There's also a puppet starch tool, and the puppet starch tool specifies how much influence certain points have over one another. So for example, if you don't want the trunk to be super elastic and super bendy, you can spray starch on it, and that would make it more rigid, like a trunk might intend to be. Now, these tools are pretty great if all you have access to is After Effects. However, I prefer to kind of do some splitting of these objects, for example. So I might take these into Photoshop and chop these palm branches up individually. That way I can control them one at a time, do some kind of creative parenting, that sort of thing. So I don't use the starch tool as much just because I feel like it's a little bit labor intensive to get the results that I want. But it's certainly welcome for you to explore those and see if you can get some good results out of them. But that's it for the puppet basics, and I hope it's kind of shown you and kind of opened up your eyes on how using these tools can get a little bit more fluid animation, a little bit more exaggerated animation perhaps than say just simple position and rotation movements.